Good morning and hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And as always, man, we're bringing some really, really great guests to you guys, man. And my next guest is freaking phenomenal. He's doing great work out there in the Parkinson area, and he knows a lot of people that I know as well, man. We talked, and this man has an amazing story, but he's doing some amazing things too. Now, before we get started, let me just remind you, if you haven't already, do me a favor, head over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, I also need to remind you that this is for educational purposes only, just in case if you didn't see it in the new intro. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my next guest, and we're going to jump into it. But let me just say, if you guys are in the Colorado area, please be careful today. We just got hit. We're getting hit with a major snowstorm today, so be careful out there, please. And now, without further ado, Dr. George Ackerman. How you doing, my brother? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for your time and your viewers. It means a lot to me and my family to allow us the platform to speak out about Parkinson's disease awareness and hope for a cure. And I also feel for everyone in the snow. I'm from New York originally. I remember days snow shoveling, so I'm sending my love to everybody out there today.
I mean, it is crazy out here, man. I was driving around last night when it hit. Well, actually, earlier this morning when it hit. And I tell you, driving around, I was just sliding all over the place. I said, you know what? I'm going back home. I'm not doing this. Now, before we get started, go ahead and introduce yourself. And I know you said that you're from New York, but remind people where you're from.
Sure. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I had a passion to help victims of crime throughout my life. So before the world of caregiving, I was literally thrown into it. Can't prepare for that. I worked as a lawyer in D.C. and also Florida. I passed the federal bar here, and then I decided there's just so many cases that I couldn't help victims like I wanted to. So I went into the police academy in Miami, Florida, as a newbie trainee and a lawyer in the academy. It was definitely not the easiest situation, but I fought through it, helped me really fight challenges and learn so much about the criminal justice field. And unfortunately, again, there's just too many calls in the field. You can't really help more than pen a brochure. So thankfully, I was able to do my PhD and dissertation on aiding African-American mothers who lost their loved one due to murder. And it really brought me literally knee to knee with those individuals who, unfortunately, are often forgotten by our criminal justice system. From that, it brought me to caregiving. Unfortunately, my mother had Parkinson's disease. For 15 years, I became her caregiver only the last 4 when it really took over her life. And I correlate a lot of the times the Parkinson's community throughout the world a little bit like the family members who lost their loved one, because until last year, there's been no legislature for people with Parkinson's or caregivers, caretakers, or even for research to find a cure until thankfully I can announce we're going through history. Last December 2023, the House of Representatives passed a bill called the National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease. So hopefully you and your viewers can reach out to their senators even today or tomorrow, because the bill is going to go to the Senate hopefully this year or next, and all the president has to do after is sign it into law, and that'll really change the world for people with Parkinson's and the caregivers.
Wow, that is, you went from law enforcement, you went from, wow, you've had one hell of a journey.
Yeah, the great thing in a way, it's you take the darkness but bring light, and my journey really is just beginning again in advocacy. And the reason I was in a way excited to be with you today is you actually, the literal name of the show, Grief, is something that means a lot to me. I'm still grieving even 4 years later. And just yesterday, we mentioned earlier, I feel like I was a little bit of a victim of how certain individuals in even the Parkinson's community are still forgotten. I don't have Parkinson's, and I'm no longer a caregiver of someone alive with Parkinson's, but there's still millions of people, maybe even more than that are like me, but don't have a voice at the table, unfortunately. And I'm really excited also to announce that my first book will be coming out, I hope in April. It'll be available on Amazon, but it's focused on my mother's memory and mine from caregiver to advocacy. But now I've gotten the idea literally last night that the next book is already going to be in production, and it's going to be dedicated to those who lost their loved ones due to Parkinson's, and also the people we've lost. They should never be forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you was a caregiver, right? Your mother had Parkinson's. When did she get the diagnosis of Parkinson's? Because I know you were in law enforcement, right? You were doing things out in the community, helping African American mothers with children, which that right there. And I want to talk about that for a little bit, because that is amazing work, and I think a lot of people really understand, you know, how often it happens, right? You know, when we think about it, yes, I know in a lot of cases they say, well, you know, the African American community is a small percentage out there, but it seems so huge when every time you turn around, you see in the gang violence, you see in the police brutality, you see in the murders, you know, senseless murders just on a regular basis, right? How did you get into helping mothers that have lost someone to homicide?
Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, unfortunately, I saw crime firsthand, and I always said there are people who don't have a voice, and I wanted to stand up for them. As a police officer, I actually was a reserve, I still am, but that basically means you put the badge, the gun on, you go out there, you wouldn't even know the difference, but I don't get paid. So I actually volunteered since 2006, my life to give to others who don't have the opportunity to have a voice. My mother, oddly enough, always hated when I was going, putting all that on and going into the field, because it is a dangerous field for free. You don't get
Yeah.
life insurance and nothing. You don't get it. So you're actually risking your life for others. And that's something that not everyone can do. Sometimes I've been called crazy for doing that because, again, you can be harmed and you don't have any recourse. But at the end of the day, we're all, in my opinion, people, we're all supposed to support one another. Yes, there are a few bad apples in every field, not just in law enforcement, but I saw specific individuals and a group near me in South Florida called MAMA, and the Mothers Against Murderers. And it's a group that you never want to be a part of, but thankfully they have that support. Her name's Angela Williams. If you have time, you look up Mothers Against Murderers Association in South Florida. It's in West Palm Beach, and she's amazing. She became like my own family, sat knee to knee with these mothers, and they didn't really lose their loved one due to, let's say, police crime, which of course that happens. But this was a lot of, like what you said, gang violence and just being a situation in the environment, unfortunately. And the only way to bring change and to help those grieving is to let them also have their voice be heard.
Yeah. And you was a lawyer, right? What well, you've had, now correct me if I'm wrong, but you was a lawyer, right?
In
Okay.
Florida.
Oh, you still are. Okay. Now, what when you decided to become a lawyer, what was your thought? What was the reason behind wanting to be a lawyer? Because it seemed like you followed a specific pattern, right? You went from being a lawyer to being a police officer to and you've done great work, and so I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, you are a strong voice, right?
Yeah,
Because not only do you understand the laws, but you've been on the opposite side of it too, right? You're like, you was in the court, you was out there, you're advocating, and then you became a police officer. You're out there protecting the neighborhood. Then you got into the helping individuals who have lost loved ones to murder, and then you became a caregiver. How did all of that tie in? And how does your voice helping those with Parkinson's throughout all of that have an effective impact? Because I know you're going to city council meetings, right? You're out there, you're telling people like, hey, we have a problem, right? And we need more support in these areas.
Yeah, my initial goal was to go towards federal law enforcement, but I really fell in love with the world of teaching, and I feel that I learn a lot every day from my students. I've been able to have the honor to teach around the country, criminal justice, the law, business. So I really enjoyed that, and I was doing the PhD, and I got an offer from a federal agency, and they said, you'd have to leave the PhD. You just don't have the time for that. And I knew my heart that was my calling, is to be an educator, but also to keep learning from the students. So I
Mhm.
decided to go more into the world of education. And I think that if you're in education, you're also a continual learner. We always joke and say I've been in school like literally since I was born, and still there because now I'm teaching in college. So, and that brings the advocacy for the Parkinson, because there are people, and there's nothing wrong with it, who are kind of more quiet, maybe move on with their life, and they don't need their voice. They, unfortunately, again, their loved one passed, and they need to get back to their life and their kids. So I'm the opposite in a way. I believe I just don't believe in forgetting my mother. I want her to be remembered. I feel like her life, 15 years alive, and likely 15 after, were stolen from her and from our family, along with many others who lost their loved one due to whether it's crime or also Parkinson's. Because to me, Parkinson's disease is almost like a crime. Obviously, you can't convict the disease, but in a way, that's how I feel. I almost felt like I coined the term, maybe the secondary Parkinson's, because I sat there with my mother while she struggled throughout the time with Parkinson's, and also the family members of homicide victims. They're often forgotten, and that's where they also grieve, and they need to be able to be reintegrated back into society. The only way I did in my research was that they can do that is through community support. Religion was huge, Christianity for some, and that's their community is very important. So again, I'm doing a little article now on social media, like we're on. You can see if you're here live, all the different social, and it's giving some incredible opportunity, like for us to have this discussion. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to keep having it. It's not just about us talking, like I mentioned, for an hour and goodbye. This has to continue forward. If we even reach one person today that now learns about Parkinson's, then we've changed the world for the better, and we've come closer to a cure.
Yeah. Now, and you've met Michael J. Fox too, right? And I remember watching Michael J. Fox when I was a kid. Teen Wolf, there was a couple of TV shows that he was on, and watching him. And then I remember when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, um, and I really, watching him throughout the years. Of course, on TV, he went from this happy-go-lucky man to where he started showing the signs, the disease started showing up, right? And then he went from there. Then he was in a wheelchair. Then he went from not being able to, hardly being able to walk to hardly being able to talk, and he's still fighting to this day, right? And you've had the opportunity to meet this gentleman.
Yeah, he's a hero to me, and it's funny. I don't get a lot of opportunities to go out a lot just because of work and family. I like to do my work and be in my own little world. But we noticed an opportunity once in a lifetime where he'll be located in Orlando for a special convention. So I looked at my wife, who has been really the key to me, not just grieving, but being able to even sit here today to talk to you. Because even though my mother passed 4 years ago, I feel like I relive it every day. And it's not over yet until we find a cure
Mhm.
for it. But so I looked at my wife and I said, "Do you think we should go?" And she said, and usually, we'd say no. It's just tough. Like that's a whole 2 days traveling almost. But she looked at me and said, "Yeah, I think you should do it." And I said, "I think you're right." So, it was spontaneous, but I thought in my head maybe it might be the last opportunity to ever have with him. He has
Yeah.
a big major galas for his Team Fox gala. And again, I'm just saying what I believe. I could be wrong, but he hasn't been at the last three galas due to possibly health. And this was a rare opportunity. So I decided, let's just go. Unfortunately, I had surgery a few weeks before. So I'm rolling around with a boot. And I probably did about 3 or 4 miles on a scooter over bridges. And it was not, like anything in life you want to fight for, you got to get it done. And we
Yeah.
were all excited that morning. I left early. And with my luck, the battery in the car died. So I was like crushed. Like I thought we weren't going to make it. Thankfully, my law enforcement side, I ran into a state trooper inside the gas station, and he saw that I was an officer and he helped us. So he saved that day. So we rushed over. I got the opportunity to meet Mr. Fox, and you kind of felt like my life flashed before my eyes. It went so quickly. I did tell him about TogetherForSharon.com. I told him about my mother, told him how he's my hero, and so many others. And we thanked him for fighting, because many times people, if that celebrity status, might not want to be, in a way, come out. they might kind of be private and just move forward, but he's given his whole life now to research to find a cure. And again, his wife has been incredibly supportive, his family, and people like me are out there still sharing the Michael J. Fox Foundation with people to be aware. And we're actually flying April 29th to New York City, my wife and my daughter, to walk in something called the Unity Walk. It's the 30th year. It's in Central Park, New York City. So it's going to be, I'll try and bring it a little live online, but it's going to be something that just inspiring in memory of my mother.
Wow, man, that is amazing. That is truly amazing, right? Uh, how amazing that when you can meet your heroes. I think that is truly a feeling that you can't describe, right? Because it's like, wow, like, and I've met a few of my childhood heroes, man. So I definitely understand that. And, whatever we can do to get the word out about the Unity Walk and bringing more awareness to the Parkinson's, let me know. Because we got many more that we're going to do as well. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about how your relationship was with your mother, right? And when she got her initial diagnosis, because I think what happens a lot of times, people get wrapped up into when their loved ones do get diagnosed with Parkinson's, they get wrapped up into the different changes of it, right, and not really enjoying the life with them, right?
Yeah,
Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about who your mother was before the diagnosis, when the diagnosis happened, and what did you see through, and the commonalities, so people can be aware of what they're looking at, right? And how to effectively care for that individual.
Sure. My mother was very independent her whole life. She sacrificed a lot. She was an educator. She actually was a middle school, I believe, teacher, lower school, and substitute. She had a master's degree, and she really sacrificed and gave it all up to raise me and my brother. So I felt that the day my calling came, which wasn't prepared, I didn't even dream I would have to do that, to become her caregiver and help her. It was something that I would do again over and over, because she sacrificed so much during her life to make me the man I am today. Without her sacrifice, I don't think I honestly would have been where I'm at now. She was always right next to my side at every graduation, through the good, even the sad times. I remember, again, we're from New York, when 9/11 happened. She was the first person I called, and we were in shock because my grandmother used to work there, one of the World Trade Centers. So just from the good, the bad, and I'll never forget even our dance together at my wedding, or the first day my mother found out that we were having our first child, which would be a girl. She always wanted a girl and never had one. So she was excited to give dolls and dress up my daughter, which we were happy to allow her to do. And so she did have some incredible times. Unfortunately, the last year of her life and some of the tougher times kind of in the grief sense have taken over the good memories at times. So she had it for about 15 years, Parkinson's, and we don't really know why she didn't tell us much more about it. We don't know if she wasn't aware herself, if the doctors weren't as helpful at that point. And also, she just never wanted to be a burden on anyone else. So for 15 years, she had it. And it was only up to, like, for many years, she would have like stiffness in her left arm, which just made a little bit trouble to eat, but didn't really affect her life. She still was able to see her friends. She still went to eat. She, liked to come to the house, and we all had family dinners and breakfasts and things. Unfortunately, the last 4 years, the beginning of that, that's what really sparked my world of advocacy and helping her. She went to a special study at a university, and we don't know what happened because she was very healthy. She had no other illnesses or at all that we're aware of, but she came back that night, and I got a call at 4 a.m. to rush over to my mother's house. And she had been moving out furniture in fear that Nazis were inside her house and they were going to harm her. And having that call at 4 a.m., whether it's law enforcement or anyone, if you're just human, is just heartbreaking. And I was, kind of shocked, didn't know what to anticipate, worried, and didn't know if I could even help. So I get there, I brought her to the emergency room. They said we saved her life. But that was when she really kind of went on a downward spiral in health. And also, what was even worse than that, which was tragic, after I brought her to the hospital, I went back to get some of her clothes, and I never saw anything like this. It was almost out of a horror movie, but surrounding her whole room was post-it notes, like what we used to keep reminders that we might have a meeting today. She had names of people that were from the past, future, and animals, and she wrote if they were alive and in the room or not, because at that point she had late onset dementia kicked in, and she was now having hallucinations and delusions, which I never even heard of, to be honest, before. So I was really just thrown into a world that you can't prepare for, and just tried to battle each fight every day as we could. But I do feel like every day we kind of were like a nail in the hammer, being crushed down more and more. And
Right.
every day I thought we could control something. I just wanted her to live without pain. And just, we didn't also know, because you're told you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. So we were in our brains, my family, that she might have this, but she'll still be fine and be with us till 80 or 85. She was only 69 when she passed on 1/1/2020. And that's when we started TogetherForSharon.com in her memory.
Wow, man. Now you said a few things, right? And there's some things that actually shocked me, because when we think about the hallucinations, we normally, associate that with dementia, right? You know what I'm saying? But that of course, um, these are teachable moments. These are teachable moments, and it's so, which is, I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to talk about this. Let's talk about what are the symptoms of Parkinson's, right? Because I don't think a lot of people really understand. I think when people find out, it's already too late, right? But there are telltale signs, right? That the disease is becoming more prominent within that individual. And shout out to caregivers out there. I know they go through a whole hell of a lot, because a lot of times, from what I've seen, and we both know Betsy, right? Huge advocate out there. You guys are already connected over there. We talked about it, and I've had her on the show before too. But what are some of the telltale signs that this disease is starting to pop up in a person's life?
It's the fastest, unfortunately, growing neurodegenerative disease in the world now. It's not just in the U.S. And the problem is Parkinson's affects each individual so differently. So what happened to my mother in our journey doesn't mean that's the same thing that'll happen to someone else. There's actually no medical diagnosis right now for Parkinson's. What they do, medical doctors, again, I'm not a medical doctor, so see your own medical doctor, or usually a specialist in movement disorders. But they'll take tests for other disorders and they'll try to narrow it down. And if you pass the other test, then you have Parkinson's, which is not really 100% effective. Thankfully, this research is really making a big jump. Last year, I believe they came out with something that is known as a biomarker, where eventually you might be able to have a needle in the spine and determine if you have Parkinson's, which will change everything. Because right now we have individuals who have Parkinsonians, which are similar to Parkinson's, but not Parkinson's, and you can be misdiagnosed. There's people who aren't sure they might have it, so aren't diagnosed in time. Again, a lot of the background of my mother, we're not really sure, because she didn't share it as early as I wish, but I don't know if there would have been anything to change. The signs are usually the stiffness, like rigidity. Also, as time goes on, individuals could whisper or lose even their voice. My mother's weight and her health deteriorated very quickly. We think that trial she went to, that maybe they changed the medicines too drastically, but since that day of the fourth year, she just again went down. And she had dystonia, which is the curling of the toes. She also had like where you not as I don't want to say bad, but if you notice, Mr. Michael J. Fox has really external tremors, and they're very noticeable. My mother had more internal, but toward the end, even watching videos toward the end, I noticed she did have a little bit of the, not able to stop moving, but not as rigorously. So those are some of the signs, but it's really rigidity. They call it dyskinesia also. So there's many different terms for all the things that individual Parkinson, but the worst really sometimes is the uncontrollable movement, because that's crippling. I know people who have Parkinson's that had to leave their careers, their jobs, their families. So this is not something that's just taken lightly. And some, again, don't want to know if they have it. Some we find out too late. But there is no cure. There are steps today that can hopefully decrease the speed of the disease, like fitness. Boxing is a big one called rock steady boxing. There's punching for Parkinson's. There's push-ups for Parkinson's. There's so many things out there. And when I was going through this, I started to really feel lost, like I was alone, and I had no one to really share my grief with at the time. So I decided, again, when it was over, unfortunately for us, that the journey really isn't over. It might be for me and my mother, but there's so many still out there fighting and need a cure. And that's what TogetherForSharon.com was started really right after she passed. We just wanted a few people to know about her journey, because I feel like it wasn't ended how we would have liked. But then I found, even the other day, there's a little teeny counter on our website. We've had over 30,000 people visit, and it's just incredible. And just last note is, we don't ask for money. I don't want anything. I just want a cure for Parkinson's in memory of my mother. And then hopefully one day we can also end what I do. That's the number one dream for Michael J. Fox Foundation, or many organizations, is that we'll be here until you don't need us anymore. And obviously I'll leave the site up there, but I don't want it to keep growing. Right now, even yesterday, we just added a section which really we need more, shed more attention to. And that's people like me who are still here with us in the world, and we still have a voice, but we lost our loved one due to Parkinson's. And we just added literally last night in memory section. So I'm going to start, if anyone's listening, lost their loved one due to Parkinson's, I'm going to really portray their journey and make sure that their loved one never forgotten.
I think that's important. I think that's really important. And thank you again for that, right? Bringing that other side of the awareness in there, because, you cannot forget those that are left behind, which now leads me to my next question. Let's talk about the grief aspect of it, right? Because no one ever really thinks about that. When we think about grief, grief can be grief. You can grieve anything, but this is a special type of grief, man. Because you was there. You had to, you watched your mother, be the person that she was to the person that she came to, this terrible, terrible disease. And no one really asked, the question, how are you doing? Right? Let's walk through those moments. Let's go through your process of grieving, right? Because you're not only are you losing a mother, but you're losing your loved one to a disease that really has no mercy, right? So let's walk me through that grieving process, Dr. George.
It's it's again one that you can't plan for, unfortunately. In a good way, my mother was incredibly, like, she liked to plan, so she actually took care of a lot of the end of life things that we didn't really even know about, like a will. And I was a power of attorney, so she helped in a big way, even beyond her life, to make it a little bit easier, even though you can't really say that. But so there's a lot of things people need to think about, and it's tough topics, from grief to death with dignity to end of life. People even today still don't talk about. And I think me and you need to start something in the future where a whole podcast would just be for those end of life issues. Because I've actually tried to reach out to people, and they still don't want to really discuss that. We don't have something in Florida yet called Death with Dignity. We treat our animals better than our loved ones. And the last my mother, again, a nice way for us was we were able to enter something new here, which was a year of hospice, the end of her life. Unfortunately, Parkinson's isn't still considered by law end of life disease, even though it took my mother's life. So there's a lot of laws and things that are still a disaster, in my view, as an attorney and just a son who lost their loved one. But there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, talked about, if we're ever going to make change or bring resolution. Being there, though, again, the biggest word would be shock. Really, even still today, I'm still grieving, but being here with you and your audience helps me. It's really the only way I can keep going. Also, my family, again, my wife and children, sister-in-law have been incredible support. They, even now they're working hard while we're here talking about my mother. And they, we need together, we need to do this, because there's still a piece of me that left when she left this world. And I'm never going to stop fighting till we have a cure in her memory. it's too late again for us, but it's not for the 1 million approximately in the US with Parkinson's. And again, more and more numbers are growing. It's sad. And 10 million around the world. So I had the honor to meet with over 600 people, and I've interviewed from England, France, Spain, the UK, to Iceland, Africa, you name it. And I only learned this a year ago, which is pretty sad because I wasn't aware. So I'm still learning. But imagine how many people aren't aware that in Africa, they consider Parkinson's witchcraft. And a gentleman I've become friendly with told me he shared his story, and they took his mother from him and put her far away, and he had to escape to see her because they thought it was witchcraft. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions. Like Parkinson's used to be thought of as the elderly man disease, which is completely false. There's a group called Young Onset Parkinson's Network who I really admire, and those are younger people. Michael J. Fox had it, I believe, at age 30 or young. So it's not something that just shows up, at the last years of your life. So we had the good fortune, at least with the last year of hospice. Usually hospice, like is a week or a few days. We were in it for a whole year. So it was really torture. My mother had major stomach issues too due to all these crazy medicines. Mm-hmm. And those would help with tremors and things, but a lot of them didn't really work effectively. And we never in our dreams knew or thought she would pass away because of Parkinson's, because doctors ensured that she won't. So you can see there's a lot of learning still to be done, even in the medical field. I don't blame them. I blame the disease, but I don't think Parkinson's disease defines a person. It's just something they have to adjust to. And there are people out there now we learn who are fighting and living. But there are new things research shows too. If you do 45 minutes exercise a day, it might decrease the progression, and also many other areas like diet. The stomach and the gut are a big topic that could be an entire podcast. And I just think there needs to be a lot more still with grief. And just the other day, like I said, I feel that I'm still forgotten. I've had some incredible people in the Parkinson's community who have opened their arms wide open and become like family. But there are people and organizations, unfortunately, that still push us out of the conversation and out of the table. And I'm still baffled asking anyone listening to tell me why, because you really need the people with Parkinson's. You need the people, caregivers who are alive fighting it, and you need the people who lost a loved one. I think part of it is, in my opinion, that they don't want to learn about what happened because it's tragic, and they don't want to know or think that it could end their life. But you can look at our example, unfortunately, and it did, because my mother, again, medically, even though I'm not a medical doctor, didn't have any other end of reason to have lost her life at only age 69, which is very young in 2024.
Yeah. Now you said a few things, but I want to touch on one specifically. As the caregivers out there, I don't think people give these caregivers enough credit for what they do. And again, it goes back to a conversation I had with Betsy, and she was a caregiver to her husband. She lost her husband to dementia, and she's been a huge advocate out here in this world. Big shout out.
I think we spoke with she lost her husband due to Alzheimer's too, but
yeah, Alzheimer's, yeah.
He passed the same day as my mother passed from Parkinson. So that's how somehow online on Facebook we met, and we become family because of we have a bond that no one will ever break. But it's sad that we came together like that. And I don't know what the odds are, 1 in 80 billion that happened, but that's how we all meet.
But Bessie is a huge name, though. I met Bessie a couple of years ago. I had her on my first podcast, right? And she and I have just been friends ever since then, friends and family. And so it's to watch her grow in her show. And I was actually on her show as well a couple of years back. And I've watched the things that she's done across the board, and to hear the other side of it, being the caregiver, and she's out there in the world, and she's like, and I love it because she's raw, right? She's raw and she don't care. She tells it how it is, and and she's advocating for those caregivers out there. And you being a caregiver to someone with Parkinson's, that is huge, right? Because again, it goes back to what I said before. There's not enough respect and recognition that goes out to those individuals, because what I've seen is that when people put those loved ones into hospice and things like that, they tend to just let them be there. right? And they just kind of, they're not my problem anymore, right? And no one ever talks about what those caregivers go through, right? They're the ones who are taking the blunt of everything that you're doing. They're there, you know, all the time to watch your loved ones, to care for your loved ones, to clean up your loved ones, to care for them. And I actually had a caregiver one time on the show, and we were talking about, how she grieved. And she said something that made me tear up a little bit. She goes, I go to the funerals of the people that I care about when they pass away. I go, really? She goes, yeah. She goes, because you have to understand, we're there, we watch the transitions and we have a relationship with them, but we can't get attached to them. So when I go to the funerals, I shed a tear and I leave it there out of respect, right? And she goes, and you want to know how many family members that don't show up until the last minute? And that hurt. That truly hurt, man. And I was like, you know what? And she goes, when you're going to some 2 to 3 funerals a week, sometimes more, depending on what stage that they're at. She goes, it's kind of hard um, to not feel something because we are there. And you're absolutely right. I do something called a death cafe to help normalize the talk around death, dying, and grief, understanding the importance of having a plan, right? Because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But if we knew, if we got all of those things out the way, it would allow us more time, not only with our loved ones, right? But it would allow you time to utilize those moments with your loved ones and things like that. Go out there and do the things that you always wanted to do. You don't have these things to worry about, right? So yeah, I do that. And yes, we have to get together. We're going to run across some ideas and see what we can do to implement some things out here to the world to help normalize. But that's where I would follow your lead at, right? I would go, this is what I do. How can we implement these things into this conversation and bring that importance out there? But yes, back to the caregiver. I went off topic there for a minute, but back to the caregivers, man. Huge shout out to those individuals out there. What would you tell those caregivers out there? I know you got something you got to do afterwards. So, but we got many more to do.
Yeah.
What,
Basically, you have to forget the past. If you had a minor argument or a little tiff or things, and just look at the present and be there to support your loved one. They most have done that for you. So that's why, again, I gave back what I thought in a way was my duty, and I would never let my mother have done it alone. She also made us swear in a funny way that we aren't allowed to put her in a home, but sometimes it's not reasonable. We had to spend 12,000 a month just to have people kind of watching, so she didn't fall. They didn't really know much about Parkinson's, and
uh-huh.
again, my book in April, I hope, comes out, and it's going to really take you deep, dark inside, the good, the bad, and then the positive. How I'm advocating today, but I discussed the symptoms, the first signs, the support of my wife and family, the children. She had 3 beautiful grandchildren. They used to love to sit outside on Sundays and blow bubbles together, and now I look at the backyard and it's not there anymore. So it's still
Right.
grieving every time I think of that. Then trying to find a good aide just to kind of watch over her was a complete nightmare for another show. And then, finally the caregiving, her last week of life, remembering her and all her family and friends, the mission forward, and why I'm so grateful, like, to you and so many out there who again are using their platform to help share awareness, because the only way we'll find a cure is if the whole world is aware. I always talk about COVID, which is terrible, but in a way the world knew about it. And I'm not saying we had a cure for it, but we had a vaccine, we had something. We tried things, whether they're good or bad, we tried it. And I don't feel enough people are doing that for Parkinson's, because either enough aren't aware or they're just finding out about it. People are, now I'm speaking to, might not have Parkinson's, but they're telling me their mailman has it now, or their cousin, or their friends. So it's popping up, sadly, more and more and more. And it's also sad that my book is, in my research, the only one that's ever out there in the United States, at least, that comes from the point of a son who lost his mother due to Parkinson's, the first. So we're making history with the National Plan to End Parkinson's, with the book, with our talk. But I still think the word grief is something that's not talked about enough. I've done maybe 100 of these, and I've never seen the word grief in a show. That's why I commend you and thank you again. And I think that's something that I need to also join in with, because like I said, I'm still grieving every day. And the only way to keep fighting is to meet, again, inspiring people like you and your audience, and for them to share this podcast and all that you do. So thank you again for that.
Oh, of course, man. Of course. And like you said, we're both in a situation to where these things, grief is something that's going to happen, and it needs to be talked about. It needs to be normalized. It is a part of life, right? And you can grieve anything in this world. And to bring awareness, to normalize those conversations is just one small step, right? One small step in the right direction. Identifying.
Someone actually said, everybody has a beginning. Maybe you told me, but the other day someone said everyone has a beginning, a middle, and end, but no one wants to discuss the end.
Right. And when we do, it's already too late, right? So we still got a lot of work to do in this world, man. And my goal is just to keep doing the right thing, to keep inspiring other people to come up and have a voice to talk about the things that are going on, to bring awareness, to share their stories, wonderful stories like yours and things like that. And yes, you guys are going to see a lot more of him, because we got a lot more that we can do to help bring awareness in so many different areas, but to how do we support our caregivers, and all of these different things. And so if you guys have any ideas that maybe you're going through something similar, and hopefully we can make a difference, find a cure, normalize these conversations, surround yourself with people that have gone through something similar. That way you can be supported properly around people that understand and not feel judged, right? And I think that's a huge thing, not feeling judged in these areas. But before I let you go, tell people where they can find you, right? Yeah, tell people where they can find you.
Thanks. Yeah, just again, want to thank you and your audience, not just for today, but even the future. I think we have some incredible similarities for sadness, but great positive outcomes moving forward. Again, everyone I meet makes a difference, but just sharing this one time can maybe change the world. I always leave everyone with this quick statement. We love you, we support you, and we care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I will advocate for you and with Tony, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always say, I'm just getting started. And I only say that because if you want to find me, you go to TogetherForSharon.com. It's right up here. And
it kind of switches around, oh yeah.
And that was really just dedicated and originally just in memory of my mother and her journey. But it's really, unfortunately, not just about us anymore. I learned a year ago. It's about everybody out there. We're all family in this fight. You'll find the 600 interviews I've done completely free. I host them for free. We probably put tons and tons of money into this on our own family because it's a message that needs to be out there. We've also donated about $17,000 to organizations. If you click on donate, we don't accept money, so you can't give us anything, but you can donate to organizations like the American Parkinson Disease Association and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And the link is really amazing because it's in memory of my mother. So if you donate $1, it goes to them, but on behalf of my mother, and she'll never be forgotten. So there's a lot of things. I told one gentleman, he wrote me and said, I spent 10 hours on your website. And I said, don't do that. I don't know. I mean, the reason he did it is he actually had Parkinson's and he felt alone. But then when every morning, one of the 600 interviews shows up. Even this morning, a gentleman in another country, I believe in Germany even, his story showed up, and he's a member of Team Fox in the Michael J. Fox Foundation. He has Parkinson's, and he's out there fighting. And I just want a voice for everybody. We're all, together in this. The disease, Parkinson, doesn't discriminate gender, race, anything. Anyone, unfortunately, is in its way. But again, there's just so much on there. It's still growing. We just added the in memory part. So I'm going to work on that. And the first book, I hope, will be out soon. And then the next one now, like I told you earlier, will definitely be dedicated to people like me who I feel are forgotten. in a way, who lost a loved one. Just because you lose a loved one due to Parkinson doesn't mean your voice doesn't matter anymore. And that was really shocking. And that's something I want to explore. And again, I just want to thank you. And I hope we have a lot more, even start our own podcast together one day, because I
Oh yeah.
think grief, not just for Parkinson's, we also have a new thing. I was approached by a PSP Awareness. It's a group organization in Canada. And I told them, I don't have Parkinson's and I'm not a caregiver today with someone alive. And I feel like alone. Like, what about me? So we started for free again on virtual once a month. I believe the third Thursday. There's a link, but you can come. It's for people who lost their loved one due to any disease, not just Parkinson's, and it's a support group. And again, I'm hosting it, but I just wanted a place for people like me and those who lost a loved one due to anything to feel safe, confidential. It's not recorded. And we don't want too many people. Like I really don't want more than 10 people because I want everyone to have an opportunity to speak. And we just started it, so it's kind of been slow now, but I'm hoping it'll grow. And that's just another. I just want to have opportunities for people who are still grieving like me and who do feel alone. And we just have to make sure we reach them to let them know again they're never alone in this fight, and we're going to keep fighting until there's a cure. But thank you again.
Of course, man. Of course. And we'll talk a little bit more because I know you got to run. But I would love to do like a monthly segment with you, right? You come in and share, bring a little bit more insight, a lot more insight into this world to help bring more awareness to it. And then we can sit down whenever you get a chance, and hopefully after the weather stuff breaks, the internet will be a lot better, and so we can start talking about what does this next podcast look like, right? So you guys if you guys are listening, throw out some suggestions. Let us know what you guys think about that, and how we can do better in bringing this awareness out there. Dr. George, thank you for being on the show today, and just thank you for sharing such an incredible journey and such amazing work. And again, we got a lot more to do, right? We got a lot more to go. And let me know how I can help out in this crusade of helping individuals, and helping those caregivers that have lost loved ones, helping those family members who have lost loved ones to this terrible disease. And hopefully, sending out many, many blessings, no matter if a person is religious or not, send out some huge thoughts, positive thoughts, and helping find a cure to this disease, so we don't have to keep losing loved ones the way that we are around this world. And now, with that being said, for everyone who's tuning in or who will be tuning in later, thank you guys for everything. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this conversation. Dr. George, thank you for being on the show today. This is going to conclude this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And if you guys give me a minute, you guys can follow us on all of our social medias. And if you have not already, head over to the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, and we got something new coming up, as always, always experimenting, things like that. But until next time, you guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for allowing us to keep bringing these stories to you guys. And until the next episode, we love you. Peace.